There was another architect called Peter Clegg. Peter is fabulous. Feldon and Clegg, really, really interesting, kind of quite green architects. They really struggle hard. And he did the same thing. This is basically 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide is a block of ice. We did this in the Bodleian Quad in Oxford. It attracted a huge audience, but then they kind of go, they're all intrigued by the ice. But then they get the ice is melting, and then they get the volume, and you just make physical something that's a very abstract concept. And it really gets through to people in a very direct way. Hence the value of the creative artists getting involved with this situational problem. Okay, I'm just going to play you another piece of film. These are short snippets. It's only about 2 or 3 minutes. But there are 2 people in this film. One is Rachel White-Reed, and the other is the choreographer Siobhan Davis. And it's interesting how different people have reacted to being in the Arctic and then created subsequent work.
I think mainly the reason I wanted to come was because of the whiteness of it all, actually. And it's very like a desert as well, which I didn't quite expect. The first moment I came out into it, I felt like an astronaut. You feel like you've just landed on this place, and you feel like you shouldn't actually be here. It's not a place for humans, really. I think it's such a hostile environment, and if you're not careful, the cold will just take your life force within seconds.
The beauty, sheer physical beauty, is already something that imprints on me. It's a skin over something far more ferocious. I sense a cold. I sense a vulnerability. I feel myself as something hot and bloody. My body, if it was harmed, the flesh would bleed. So I find my warmth, the little bit of warmth that I have, I need to protect. I would ask people to understand the idea of protection, of care.
It's amazing the place the art, it strips away all of the superficial other kind of thinking that goes on in your head. It leaves you very, very directly with something you're trying to engage with. It is that partly that white kind ofness of it, but it's also the ferocious cold. And the fact you actually have to protect yourself. And the care, as Siobhan was saying, is the care you actually need to protect about yourself. If you fell over on one of the long walks we did and broke a bone, you would then stop walking, which probably means that you probably had half an hour to live in those temperatures. So you take amazing care about yourself. And she just transferred that care. Well, wait a minute, if I can take that amount of care for myself, then surely we should be able to take that kind of care towards other people. And then Rachel was up there and she walked and she loved it and she absorbed everything, and she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. But then she came back and she was the first one. She did a huge exhibition at the Turbine Hall at the Tate Gallery, which was all these white cubes and blocks. And it was totally inspired by the work she did or the way she absorbed the information in the Arctic. It's a beautiful piece of art. Just to explain what, in a way, the Arctic is great, it starts, but actually most of the work that the artists have done has been since they've returned back into their studios and work practices. We did an exhibition at the NHM, and Siobhan suddenly thought, well, wait a minute, you get all these cabinets with these, endangered species or defunct species, and the only thing you've got left of this species is this kind of stuffed bird or a stuffed something or other, and that's it. There isn't, that is the end of the line. So what she did was to create this cabinet, but instead of having a stuffed bird, there's this very beautiful little kind of hologram of a dancer that just slowly dances this sort of 6-minute cycle. And as you can see, these are just stills from that process because I can't play the whole 6 minutes. But the costume itself she had this beautiful costume of white sticks. And as those sticks, it's great. If you have them, she had 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 sticks in her costume, she can use them as tools. They make extensions of the body, they become very elegant. Then you add a few more, and then she kind of goes, well, wait a minute, I can be a little bit articulate here, but less. But then eventually we had 200 sticks sticking in her, and she couldn't move at all. She was just totally, just solidified. And in a way, this is the kind of Siobhan's kind of going, well, wait a minute, how much stuff do we need? How much, we have to be careful of our own evolution. There are dangers to be attached to it. Myself, I was working with an American writer, Gretel Ehrlich, who's written a book about the time she spent with Cape Farewell up in the Arctic. And one of the ideas that came through is these writing, I wanted these slogans that you could just project onto ice and then actually would become quite strong, very succinct messages. But they're not kind of advertising slowly. I mean, it's almost poetry. So burning ice is, it's not logical, but actually we all know what it means. Or you can be actually much more aggressive and self. This obsession with self, or this notion of self, or the way we actually describe ourselves and say, well, wait a minute, I'm this isolated being, and therefore I can describe myself totally by that notion of self, is a fairly new concept, and it really only came back with the Enlightenment. So you're sort of talking 1850s. But it's not the only way of seeing ourselves. There's lots of challenges going down, and especially now, into the ethical position of actually being so perceived or self-perceiving that actually I'm this island, when actually we're much more integrated with all the people around us. So there's a kind of challenge to that notion of self. So that, that's just my kind of going, well, wait a minute, this is just something I'm offering up as a kicking point, a starting point to start people thinking. And then Amy, I was working with Amy Buckland on the 07 expedition, and Amy came up with this kind of, this is just taken from banking speak. And she did a series of about 5 of them, which kind of, these very, very kind of sexy ways of moving money around that are fairly unstabling. And then, of course, then you get the banking crisis, and you think, well, okay, really great, guys, but, you would try, you were banking abstractly far too much. There was no basis for the kind of ways you were manipulating or growing or inventing money and destabilizing the economic process. Also, Amy's done a lot of work with carbon trading. At the moment everybody's banking their shirt, the carbon trading is the way to solve the climate problem. But you're then back in the market forces. And you're kind of going, wait a minute, is this the way to go forward? So Amy is really questioning that process. So, these kind of very succinct kind of little messages. Now, again, we try everybody. There's a poet came up with this, Lem Sissay, who's a fabulous British poet. And this is a very short film that he sort of made for Darwin's anniversary this year. So it's sort of about Darwin, but it's actually most about our position in the world right now. It's only 3 minutes long, but it's quite powerful. Can we have some more sound on this, and I'll control it from this end?